On this episode of In the Gun, it's time to start the Big 12 conference slate. We'll talk about the Mountaineers heading out to Lawrence to face the Jayhawks, all that and more on this edition of ITG.
Caution, this podcast contains bad jokes, optimism, and a healthy disdain for Pat Narduzzi. Watching it may increase your actual knowledge of actual football.
ITG.
All the pieces are in place for us to have a chance to win it all.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
There's Owen Schmitt in the building.
Like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Towards the end, he in here, Jed Drenning.
I'm not much of an athlete.
The thing that's non-negotiable is playing hard and playing tough.
And Wesley, Valen, Uhler. You are in the gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 276 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Uhler, as always, with the best teammates in the business. We've got the signal caller, Jed Drenning. We've got the runaway beer truck barbecuing man himself, Owen Schmitt. And as always, it takes a village, and we have plenty of people to thank for making this all possible. Our friends at Bet Online, we all know the game starts here. Big shout out to Team Toothman, everybody at Toothman Ford, our guy JR. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. A big thank you to the good people at Fortis and our buddy Rick Lewis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. To the good people at Johnston Equipment. I know they were fired up about that big Backyard Brawl win. Make sure you're checking out their location, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. You can also visit them online at Johnston, that's Johnston with a T, EQ.com. And to the Book Exchange. Get all your Mountaineer gear and WVU apparel at the Book Exchange, locally owned and operated retailer with more than 90 years of selling everything you need for game day and everything else to show you're the ultimate WVU fan. You can shop at their two locations, of course, downtown Morgantown, Evansdale on Pattison Drive, right by Towers, right by the football stadium, or you can always shop online at bookexchangewv.com. And make sure, whether you're shopping online or in the store, to get yourself 20% off on the ITG fellas. Just use the promo code INTHEGUN20 if you're shopping online, or just tell the very nice cashiers at either of their two brick and mortar locations that you are a listener of the In the Gun podcast and you want to use the promo code INTHEGUN20. That will save you 20% on your good friends at ITG on your next purchase at the Book Exchange. Gentlemen, we're heading on the road here to start the Big 12 slate against Kansas. And Jed, speaking of our friends at the Book Exchange, we are still doing our contest, our lottery this season to eventually give away that replica throwback helmet that we have. We also now know when the Mountaineers are going to wear those. That's going to be September 27th at home, a 3:30 kickoff against Utah, that we will see those throwback uniforms in action for the first time. And if you want to have a chance to win one of those replica helmets via us here at ITG from our good friends at the Book Exchange, we will have our 1965 throwback question for you coming up here on just the other side of this commercial break. But Jed, before we do all of that, you did have we did a 2-hour Pitt recap episode. I don't think that part is surprising to anybody. I think our listeners by now know that being brief isn't necessarily our strong suit here. And that was just such an incredible special day at Mountaineer Field. We had a lot to get to. But in the midst of all that, Jed, you had one more funny kind of deja vu story that you wanted to share with everybody.
Real quick, it's just I found myself at the end of the first half with the craziness that played out, with the non-penalty that vanished into the ether. I'm walking off with Rich because I need to get an interview with Rich. And, of course, you got to time these things out and strike a balance. Let him finish talking to the officials. I use finish talking in quotes. But at the same time, catch him before we get back into the locker room through the door and I lose transmission, right? So he's having his conversation with the officials, heated as it might be, sharing his thoughts. And he looked at me and said, they blew that call on my, I looked at him and said, yeah, they blew that call. Well, I was like, why does this feel so familiar? Rich is 2 feet to my left. We got three officials right in front of us, about 6 feet, and we're trying to keep pace with the officials so they hear him. Okay. And I thought back in 1994 when I was coaching with him. We were in Statesboro, Georgia, and the Georgia Southern game, first half, ended almost in identical fashion. What we felt was a blown call. Now, in that case, I'm walking off the field as a coach with Rich, and I'm letting him have it. And of course, Rich very quickly told me, I'm the head coach. I'll let him have it. Okay, fair enough. Let him have it, So now I'm 2 feet to Rich's right, walking off with him, and he's walking. We're chasing three officials in almost identical position, and just letting them have it about this non-call at the end of the first half in Statesboro, Georgia. Fast forward 31 years later, I'm once again 2 feet to Rich's right. We're once again 6 to 8 feet behind three officials, and now I have a microphone in my hand waiting to interview him when the craziness is. Just a crazy moment of deja vu that I thought was strange, and I thought I'd share that. That was just it was quite a feeling. But
when the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess, Big O.
I'd agree, Wes.
Gentlemen, it will be the Mountaineers and the Jayhawks. We're going to preview that on the other side here, but I tell you what, though, I'm kind of liking these omens, similar to last week. Kansas opened as a 12-point favorite over the Mountaineers. That number is now up to 13.5, 14, depending upon where you look at it. That means even with that big number, a lot of the general betting public was still jumping on Kansas, expecting the Mountaineers to have a bit of a letdown after that overtime win against their arch rivals in the Backyard Brawl. And Kansas, of course, coming off of a bye week with extra time to prepare and rest and get ready. But you know what, guys? I liked Rich's answer when he was on McAfee's show earlier this week, and he just said, "Hey, we're just trying to get a first down, but we'll be ready. We'll be ready."
That's a chunky number.
Don't want to get
if you ask me, Owen, if I got to pick every week, we'd be 2 touchdown underdogs. If I got to pick, I wish we were every week. But I went back.
Think about that, Jed. When we really were going on that run, when I first really got to Morgantown, we were underdogs for the first 2 years, really.
Mm-hmm.
And under Rich's regime, that's really the best way to be. No stress. Look, we're just out here trying to stack, baby.
Well, I asked myself, how often have Lance Leipold led Kansas teams? Because he is fully responsible for the resurrection of Kansas football. Took them out of the dark, dormant ages of a decade of everything they were. And I asked myself, how many times have they won a league game by 14 or more? It's actually happened 5 times. They've done it 5 times under Lance Leipold. So more credit to them. But here's the thing: it's if you want to try and explain the number, I would guess what you just touched on. We're coming off an emotionally charged win against a rival. Most people would look at that and say, okay, well, you're going to have a hangover. It's the conference opener for Kansas at their new stadium. It's incredibly meaningful in that way. They get to show off this renovation to the world. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the renovation, to be honest with you, because it needed something like that. There'll be a big crowd. There'll be a buzz. Yeah, I get it, but it doesn't bother me one bit that we are a heavy underdog. That's kind of, to Owen's point, I think we play that role well.
I think we certainly
they're wearing
do.
the All Blacks, Jed. You forgot to say that.
That's right. They're wearing the All Blacks. Yeah, they're wearing the All Blacks.
Yeah,
Everybody wants us to come out the Stormtroopers.
Last time I checked, they're not New Zealand rugby. Okay, so I ain't scared to know. I ain't no scared to know All Blacks. Okay, this ain't the New Zealand rugby team. Okay, but no, I mean, you guys are right. There's a lot of momentum around this program. They entered the preseason ranked for the first time in 15 years. I mean, they've had the same quarterback now for about 15 years, so I think they expect a lot of things out of him.
You know how long he's been there, Wes?
15 years.
It seems like they were Kansas bad ages ago, right? Jalen Daniels was actually there for a winless season. That's how long he's been there. So he's been the guy that 2020 they were winless in the COVID season. He's been there 6 years, so long that he was part of the old Kansas, and now he's been such an instrumental part of the new Kansas.
You guys know a lot of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors.
Oh,
Yeah.
doctors, baby.
But a lot of reasons for them to be jacked up about this one. Certainly, I think their most preseason expectations they've had in a while, as you guys mentioned, $300 million in renovations or whatever it was that they just did to their stadium. But they are going to have to duke it out, slug it out, strap it up, and face a WVU team that we know. I think we have good faith is going to be ready to play despite that emotional win on Saturday, despite everybody assuming that there's going to be some type of hangover. We will get into it all when we return on the other side. Kansas offense and defense against the WVU offense and defense. All of that and more when we return. You are in the gun. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG. When the sun's just rising and the work won't wait, you need the equipment that works just as hard as you do. Johnson Equipment delivers power, performance, and reliability day in, day out. Whether you're plowing fields, hauling loads, or planting the future, our tractors are built to take it and then some. Strong, reliable, ready. 0% financing available for up to 84 months on select models.
Johnson Equipment, farming made easy.
Get all your Mountaineer gear in WVU apparel at the Book Exchange. They're the locally owned and operated retailer with more than 90 years of selling everything you need for game day and everything else you need to show you're the ultimate WVU fan. Shop at their 2 locations at downtown Morgantown or Evansdale on Pattison Drive, or online at bookexchangewv.com.
When shopping online at bookexchangewv.com, be sure to enter code INTHEGUN20 at checkout for an awesome savings of 20%. That's right, 20%.
Back in the gun here as we roll along on our Kansas preview. But before we get to the Jayhawks, Jed, it is time for our Book Exchange question of the week. What did you dial up this time, Signal Caller?
I can't take credit. Schuyler wearing yet another hat this week. I asked if anybody had any ideas, and I thought he came up with a brilliant suggestion, because you need something with multiple possible answers, because what we ask the listeners/viewers to do is answer not once, not twice, but 3 times a lady in the comment section, and that way you get credit for 3 different tickets, lottery tickets, in the drawing for the helmet. Not one comment.
You can get up to
3
3
answers,
tickets every week. Yep.
3 separate comments, please. It helps the algorithm, which is why we do it that way. So here is your question. There was much buzz this week, including on the Pat McAfee show, about West Virginia's heavy package. Rich said, I could call it fat, but instead I call it heavy. Okay. He used to call those guys the hog nuts. So, did you ever hear him use that phrase?
Hog nuts?
Hog nuts,
I don't know
yeah.
if I don't know if he ever brought, I don't think he ever broke that out.
That's what the O-line were always hog nuts to him. Yeah, like, get the hog nuts fed, Let's mash, get the hog nuts fed. Well, anyway. So, in relation to the heavy package, in case you've been sleeping under a rock, at this juncture, I think you've heard about it. We had a formation that included Nico, Ty Edwards, and 9 offensive linemen. Now, you talk about something that gets the O-line engaged. That's how you get the O-line engaged. When you roll out a formation that has 9 of those cats, you're going 9 deep. They're going to get excited. And we ran it for daggone near a whole possession in the overtime session. So here's the question.
Jed,
how many snaps, if any, will Rich utilize the heavy set this week with 9 O linemen? And he talks about maybe we'll use it in the middle of the field at some point. Don't count that out. Maybe we'll throw a couple wrinkles in, this and that. Now, if you're wondering about how creative we could get, but that is the question. So we want you to submit your answers. I'm going to ask these guys, and I'll answer too, since Schuyler came up with it. How many snaps will we do it? I don't care what part of the field it's on. Just how many snaps will we roll out? 9 offensive linemen on 1 snap. Now, remember, if you're thinking, well, maybe we'll get creative and throw with it, this and that, well, you may, okay, but you're going to have to get back to the days of throwing an eligible receiver number on one of those cats if you're going to do it, because it's not like the NFL. In the NFL, you announce number 58 is an eligible receiver. In college, you got to slap an eligible number on them to do that. Never say never, and there's other things you can do that might be interesting out of it, but who wants to go first? How many snaps of the fat/heavy? Wes, what's your suggestion for the name of the formation? Fat Daddies?
I said the Fat Daddies because Fat Daddies, of course, is a beloved bar in Morgantown. That's kind of one of those, like, if you know, you know. Let's call them the Fat Daddies. But I've also seen Appalachian Ass Advance, which I think is pretty good as well too. But I guess we're open. Those are the 2 leaders in the clubhouse right now, but we're still open to suggestions.
How about the hard wedge?
The hard wedge.
It's not a wedge, but why not, right?
Hey, let's be honest, dude. Cheeseburger delight. Okay, that's how he described those guys being close to 2 cheeseburgers, 1 cheeseburger shy of 350, 340.
I think we could call it the Panther flattener or something as well too. But yeah, you're right. The cheese. How about the double cheeseburger or the something? I don't know. There's something in there. We'll work on it. Somebody will comment
Albert.
Something or say something.
Maybe working Albert in there, something. I get creative. That's another thing you can add to comments. There's your 4th comment.
That's right. That's exactly
There's
right.
your 4th
exactly
comment.
Right. But if
you
I were making
something to comment.
Yeah, if I were making comments on this, I think I'd say like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. I think we'll see it again, but it's going to have to be the right situation too, obviously, which would have to play out over the course of the game.
I wonder how many times.
Oh man, I mean, I could see them using it every goal line situation, honestly. So as many times as we get down there, hopefully that's 7 this weekend. You know what I mean?
Okay, I like it. I'll go with I'll split the difference. I'll go with 4.
Okay.
But you might be onto something, Owen. I mean, if the Eagles can make the tush push, the brotherly shove unstoppable, maybe we can make the Fat Daddies unstoppable, or the hard wedge, or what do we want to
hard wedge?
Yeah,
hard wedge, baby.
The peach
caloric intake.
The peach lot push. There we go. The peach lot push.
Oh, there we go.
The peach lot push. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, hey, yeah. Hopefully, like Owen said, we'll be down at the goal line a bunch of times, and we'll have an opportunity to potentially see that a bunch of times. But Jed, yeah, as Jed mentioned, leave your 3 separate comments. Those are your lottery tickets to get into this awesome throwback helmet giveaway that we have courtesy of our friends at the Book Exchange. Let's get into it now. Mountaineers and the Jayhawks, 6 o'clock our time. That'll be 5 o'clock local time, correct, Jed? Or are they 2 hours
it's like,
behind us?
there might
Just
even
1
be a
hour,
push.
right?
It's 1 hour. There might even be a push like 5:03 or something like that, 5:05.
Sure.
So we'll be on the air 2 o'clock out there.
Yep.
Which,
2 o'clock their time,
I just
3
got the
o'clock
itinerary.
Eastern time.
And I already forget where we're flying into.
That's push car push.
I already forget, But yeah, it's funny. We got the itinerary and has everything right up to kickoff. And in the past, the itinerary would say, okay, now after the game, you do this and you do that, and you get back to Bridgeport, your flight lands at this, and the buses wheels up, get a bridge, Morgantown, ETA. This just goes up to kickoff, and then it says bold print hard edge. So there, the rest is incumbent upon how hard of an edge we have, what time we get back, everything else. But
I love it.
so yeah, it'll be under the lights out there in their shiny, pristine new facility. I know I will say this: it's like I like old facilities, I do, but that was one that really needed a facelift. It needed some personality. It wasn't like Nippert or even Peden Stadium in Athens. It didn't have much of a personality. Like when we first started in the Big 12, that stadium, Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, it had a track around it. I mean, you felt like you were at a big high school or something. It was like an 8-lane track. It was just weird, had a strange vibe. And then they did away with the track and they put a little work into it. But this is a major overhaul with what they did here. And I am eager to see it. I'm glad they did that. I'm very glad they did that. I'm glad that they kept what they had with the history of the facility and just put a facelift on it. So I'm eager to see it because that's a program with a lot of history, you know. If you go back to the Gale Sayers days, and it's kind of neat to see some of those names populating, you know, the rafters and that kind of thing. So it deserved a facelift. So I'm kind of happy to see that. But let's see how it goes. In that environment, it's a nice test for us. We're getting on a plane for the first time. It's a bona fide road trip instead of a bus trip. Like Athens was a weird vibe just because of the setup. We had the team had a bus to Columbus, and it was tough to find a nearby town that could facilitate a travel party that large. This is more in keeping with what you're going to be accustomed to in Big 12 play. So let's see how they respond, how they react, how they handle it, and in some ways there's a touch of isolation that gives you a chance to maybe spend more time around the coaches and the player. They almost have more time together on the road. You know this, Wes, from traveling with the Steelers. But so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really am, and I want to see how this plays out. But before we jump into the weeds with this, what are your guys' initial thoughts? Just heading out there as a heavy underdog to a team that's dangerous and really turned things around under a bus league coach in his own right, Lance Leipold, much like Rich is. What are your guys' initial thoughts?
Go ahead, Big O.
I mean, underdog's a hungry dog. You know what I mean? And that's truly what I think. I think last week, we kind of found out who we were a little bit, and that never give up mentality is a dangerous mentality because when you win a big game like that, it gives you a lot of confidence. Now it can go both ways, but Rich will humble you very quickly when you think you're something else. So he does a great job at keeping the team in check. Big game, like I think back to when obviously I played and just the mentality is going into these road games. It's just the next game, right? It's the next game, just the next game, just the next game. Just keep stacking those victories. I'm sure Zach will have this team rip roaring ready to go. Offensively, we still really don't know how high powered we could be because we have new players getting plugged in. And we got new players getting plugged in at defense, so additions there as well. Going to be a great environment. It's obviously going to be a packed house with them showing off their brand new facility. They'll be hyped. They're wearing their black uniforms, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? But I'm excited. I don't really look at the line as much of a, it's been changing. It's weird. As a player, I never looked at that anyways. But I think we just need to go in and take care of business. We need to eliminate, cut from last week, right? Cut down those penalties. We didn't have very many last week, right? But let's try to cut that by 2 or by half, right? And really get down there. Defense keeps swarming like we've been swarming. I mean, it's hard to really tell who tackles anybody anymore because there's 6, 7 bodies on the pile, which you'd love to see. And offensively, just build off that offensive line, right? And I'll say it a thousand times this year because I said it before even in the season. We have to we have to continue to get better every week in and week out. We have to strive for that. Those guys have to push themselves. And all this jibber jabber I just gave you, like I said, the biggest key here is they got the victory. They never quit. There's a glimmer of sparkle and hope, right? Because now they kind of see how it works, right? They got to see the hell that they've been put through the last 2-3 months. Oh man, like Ohio, unfortunate but big deal. They come back, they respond the correct way. They're down and out and end up coming back. So let's hope they just build off of that and we'll see what goes. Got to have a big run game this week. Got to have a big run game.
I think I echo everything Owen just said there. And I think, guys, like this is a real opportunity, I think, for those guys to maybe reset expectations for the rest of the year a little bit. You guys know this better than I do. You played, I played a little bit in middle school and high school of football. Okay. You guys both played at high levels. Like so much of the early part of the season is just figuring out who you are. What do we have? What do we do well? Where do we struggle? The character, the moxie that is within all the guys on the roster. Like you really don't start to in the NFL and in college figure out who you are until like the end of September, early October. And I think in particular, when you've got a new head coach, an entire new staff, 80 plus new players, I think the kind of roller coaster that the first 3 weeks have been is to be expected. I think if anybody thought that this team was going to be a disaster, you were wrong. I think if anybody thought that this team was going to be great right away, you were wrong. I think the first 3 games have played out about as realistically as we expected. I think a lot of people would have said 2-1. They might have said we win the first 2 and then lose to Pitt, however they had it working out. But I think the highs and lows of the early season with so much change, with so much new, were to be expected. You lose to Ohio and everyone's saying, oh man, we're not going to win another game this season. You lose to Pitt and everyone's now like, hey, we could maybe be a dark horse in the Big 12, right? I mean, yeah. the roller coaster, the emotions are up and down, but it's almost like you've got like a free play this weekend, like you get to draw again in the hand, or you get to sit down at the table and get another play for free, whatever poor analogy I'm trying to draw here. Because if you go on the road and you lose to Kansas, you've now built up some good grace. People realize that this is going to be a rebuild. It's going to be up and down. But you know what? You check the most important box to everybody in Mountaineer Nation this year by beating Pitt and taking care of that. If you go to Kansas and you lose, albeit I guess if it were a blowout loss, that's a different conversation. But if you go to Kansas and you lose, I think the fan base goes, okay, we knew this was going to be the case. It's going to be up and down. We're going to have some good weeks. We're going to have some bad weeks. We'll get ready to go back home again at Utah next weekend. But if you go on the road and win, especially now as a 12, 13, 14-point underdog, depending on where you check, I think all of a sudden the fan base sits up straight in their seats and they go, hey, you know what? Maybe we won't have to just scratch and claw and try and get to a bowl game this year. Maybe we really could win 7, 8, 9 games and surprise people. That's what I think. You've almost got yourself a free play. You've almost got yourself a win-win situation Saturday. Like I said, unless you go out and you get absolutely boat raced and you get blown out, then obviously it becomes a different conversation. But other than that, I think our fan base is going to receive pretty much any outcome well. But if you go there and you win and all of a sudden you're 3-1 and you're 1-0 in the Big 12 and you got that win over Pitt, I think people would start looking around and going, you know what? Maybe this isn't going to be a sunken season. Maybe we can win 7, 8 games. Maybe we won't have to scratch and claw to try and win 5 and 6. That's the real exciting part for me. Jed, it almost feels like a bonus opportunity, like a free play, like a win-win situation on Saturday.
I would agree with that. And what I think is going to be critical is, can you continue to get a week better? Just a week. Because that was one of the things we discussed last week. Can we get a week better from Ohio to Pitt? Now, I don't know what a week better looks like, but it's a week better. What you can ill afford to do as a team with 80 plus new faces that's going to be growing with every rep, every week, and every practice period, not just every game. You can ill afford to hit a wall for even a game or two. Most teams have that situation where a game or two a year, they don't bring their premium effort, they don't show up, they're out of sync, they're out of sorts, whatever the case might be. We can't afford to be doing that as we get into league play. You have to continue, even if you're stacking pennies. You don't go broke making a profit. Get a little better each week. So we did that against Pitt. And the other question becomes, all right, now the fundamental question, like Bobby Bowden always said, there's 4 stages to building a program. He said, first you lose big, then you lose close, then you win close, then finally you win big. Well, who am I to amend what Bobby Bowden says or add to it? But I've always thought, okay, well, there is that 5th step. How do you handle that prosperity then? That's critical. Any element of prosperity, anytime you win, how as a group are you going to handle it? Because that is a profoundly difficult thing for young men to do. But as Owen said, Rich keeps you honest. Rich keeps you straight. So you might have a better chance with his approach at staying grounded. Because, I'm just going to be honest here, guys. I think Ohio's better than Pitt. I think Ohio is a better football team than Pitt.
They got a better quarterback, that's for sure.
I think they're better than Pitt. Now, that was a big win against Pitt because I do think Pitt's going to win some games. It was a big win for 1,000 reasons against Pitt. But we have to take that prosperity and then parlay it into something more and embrace this role as an underdog and go out there one at a time and just keep stacking those pennies. In this tough environment, I like the challenge. You can't go through what we went through as a team and not gel, not bond. That's one of the things Rich talked about this week. I think that's what makes this so critical. But I want to start on the offensive side of the football for Kansas, on the defensive side of the football for West Virginia. And then we'll go vice versa afterwards.
Sounds good.
First, I think we've all appreciated and been impressed with a 3-game sample size of what the young Zach Alley is doing. At some point, we got to stop calling him the young Zach Alley, right? He coaches beyond his years. He's buttoned up. I've always been impressed every chance I've had to be around him when he's with his unit, when he's with his defense, and what he has to say to him. But the national rankings reflect that. We're toward the top of the country in sacks per game, top 3 in the country. Third down defense, we're top 20 in the country. Again, 3 games is a decent sample size. So you can start talking about some of these numbers. Another big one we talked about the other day, opponents' red zone touchdown percentage. Games like this are often won or lost by how often you can turn a team away once it breaches the red zone. We're number 14 in the country. And then finally, takeaways. We're once again a defense that's back to being opportunistic. We have 6 takeaways through 3 games. And quite frankly, we should have a lot more. When you look at the number of balls that we've forced onto the carpet and not recovered, I think you could see jet fuel or kerosene added to that turnover number at some point once that part clicks. Now, the challenge with Kansas offensively, first of all, for the 3rd year in a row, you got a new coordinator. Okay, we saw Kotelnicki take off to Penn State a few years back. He was replaced by Jeff Grimes, who we were familiar with from his reliable, violent offense, his RVO from his days at Baylor, and he bounced around different places. He's off to Wisconsin after 1 year in Kansas. Now, speak of continuity, well, that's something Lance Leipold believes in. He promoted from within. He has a quarterback coach that's been on his staff for over a decade, and Jim Zabrowski. And Jim Zabrowski is now calling the shots as the coordinator. So that vision is similar to what the head coach is going to have. He's an extension of Lance Leipold. So no major shocker there in terms of you're not going to expect major change. Again, they have a 3-game sample size. When you're breaking them down, when you're scouting them, you're going to see some things that you might look at a little askance and say, I'm not so sure. Is that just because you kind of whooped up on 2 people and then played an SEC team? You got to kind of filter things appropriately in looking at this and breaking the tape down. But you'll see they're very deliberate offensively, whereas we're fast. They're methodical. They're very plotting and methodical. They're in no hurry. They run a play about every 28 seconds, which is middle of the pack in the country. Part of that is because they use so much movement offensively from a pre-snap standpoint, And it's not just motion. Like when you look at their motion tendency, their motion rate, it doesn't rank that high. I think from a pure motion standpoint, they're 42% of the time. That's like 57th in the country. But what they also do just as much as shift. They'll go 2 and 3 tight ends, a lot like us, and they'll oftentimes shift those multiple tight end looks and change the strength of their formation to try and out leverage you, get different looks. They're trying different things. They'll go formation into the boundary to the short side of the field. Sometimes, though, when they go quads, 4 receivers, including that tight end, into the boundary with nobody to the field. Sometimes when they do that, they actually go to the strength of the formation into the boundary. Sometimes it's used as a deception tool. And they'll send the quarterback off a zone read to the wide side of the field and try and use Daniel's athleticism and outflank you that way, trying to get you bunch up people toward the boundary. But so they're very methodical by purpose or in purpose with all that pre-snap movement. Now, you can kind of tell that, like us, they haven't played together a lot. They got a returning center who is probably one of the better centers or more highly regarded centers, a pro prospect in the Big 12. They have a returner at right guard, but then it's kind of like all new faces outside of that. And one of the things that you notice on tape multiple times I've seen, they kind of got away with a couple. He's not snapping the ball on time, but the O-line is moving on time, on cadence. They're not moving on the ball, they're moving on cadence. And a couple of times they got lucky that they weren't called for a false start because the rest of the O-line's moving before the football does. Something to keep an eye on. It just shows you they're still trying to develop their rhythm and continuity with a group that hasn't played together as much either. I talked about the FSL, the formation of sidelines or formation of the boundary. They'll use the quick game into the boundary with that. It's not like the challenge that Pitt presented in the sense that Pitt was going to do it with tempo, get a first down, hurry up, outnumber you to the boundary and quick screen that. No, you're going to have time to react. It's kind of an old school approach offensively in that respect. The numbers bear this out. A year ago, they only ran 64 offensive plays a game. Think about this. We had 90 against Pitt. So they had 64 offensive plays a game. Right now, they're averaging 61. So again, we forced Pitt to defend 90 snaps last week. So that's like a game and a half, for what Kansas is doing, So it's a different animal, a different challenge. And speaking of differences with Pitt, what's one of the things we spent so much time in Pitt preparation talking about their offense outside of Holstein? We talked about how dangerous an asset their running back was in the pass game. Des Reed was a weapon in the pass game. This is, and it's kind of similar to what we saw last year. Their running backs this year, they have 4 catches in 3 games. The running back room had 30 catches all of last year. It's just not something they often use. That's not who they are. There might be a wrinkle or two that they mix in, but by and large, that's not a big part of their pass game. In fact, if you want to break down where they're throwing the football, from a target standpoint, 62 targets to their wideouts, just 19 to the running backs, 19 to their tight ends, and 5 to the running backs. Again, 62 times they've targeted their wideouts, 19 times their tight ends. So what that means is 72% of the time they throw the football, Daniels is looking for one of those wideouts. So that's a big difference from some of the things that we see with some of these more diverse offenses in terms of personnel being distributed. Third downs, they've struggled through 3 games in part because they struggled against that Missouri defense. From a red zone touchdown percentage, they're kind of middle of the pack. Again, this is a little skewed because of that one game against a salty Missouri front 7 in particular. I mean, I was impressed with what I saw. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, Missouri threw $800,000 at Josiah Trotter to leave Morgantown and transfer to Missouri. He's not the only cat in that front 7 that got that kind of money or more. So they have heavily invested, and that's exactly the buzzsaw that Kansas found themselves running into 2 weeks ago when they played. Again, you mentioned they're coming off the bye. They were held to the fewest rushing yards that they've been held to since like 2017, 2018. They didn't have 30 yards rushing. I mean, they just didn't have much success in trying to move bodies against that Missouri front 7. We're not necessarily built that way. It's going to be more creativity that we try and out leverage them with than just Jimmys and Joes. So a bit of a different challenge, but they did play some pitch and catch against Missouri, especially early on when they built that big lead. They jumped out to that 21-6 lead, and then kind of Missouri just took over the football game. It was a strange game with a strange turnover at a strange time. But, I mean, outside of that, they were right on script and right on cue. They took care of business against two lesser teams, beat them as soundly as good teams will beat lesser teams. And then they went into Missouri, big rivalry game that they hadn't played in over a decade, kind of like when we renewed the rivalry with Pitt. That was a big emotional game for them. So it's good for them that they get that week off. But from a receiver standpoint, I'm impressed with at least a couple guys. You got the one kid, the Henderson kid, number one. Coming out of high school, he was one of the most heralded recruits in all the land. Signed with Alabama, much like Eli Holstein, ended up transferring out of Alabama. He lands with the Jayhawks, and you can see why he was so highly regarded. He's dangerous, he's twitchy, he's explosive. They go after him more than they go after everybody, and he has vertical threat speed. We talked about how well our corners have played through 3 games. I do like where our corners are as a group. When you look at what's played out, whether it's Jason Chambers, Jordan Scruggs, Michael Coates, those guys need to keep bringing it. We're pretty sticky on the perimeter. I really think we are. When those guys are asked to eat space and take away easy access throws, they've been tall to the task so far on the perimeter. But this is a whole different challenge with not just Emmanuel Henderson, but also Cam Pickett. I think Cam Pickett, number 7, is a dangerous weapon. The running back room for Kansas, Daniel Highshaw spent all that time behind Devin Neal. Devin Neal's gone, graduated as the leading rusher in the history of Kansas football, which that says a lot when you look at some of the names that have been through there, from John Riggins to Gale Sayers. So Devin Neal is a player. He's gone. So they lost their top 3 receivers. From the Lawrence kid to Luke Grimm. I mean, they were a talented football team a year ago, and we were fortunate to come back in the nature we did and beat them in Morgantown. They were a really good football team. They cut some tough breaks early on, but if you remember, they regrouped and won all those games against ranked teams down the stretch. That's coaching. Lance Leipold's a heck of a football coach, and now he's been tasked in the offseason with replacing all that lost talent. I think one of the areas that they've struggled is trying to get things humming up front. They lost considerable talent up front, and the answers that they've tried to insert so far, again, Bryce Foster is the strength of that unit at center, but outside of him and the right guard, they've struggled at both tackle spots and to some degree the left tackle. More specifically, we'll get into this when we also get into Jalen Daniels and how his game has changed a little bit over the course of a year. You have, and this has made its rounds on social media this week. I mean, all these people are diving into PFF and some of the other metric sites and seeing the numbers that their left tackle has struggled so mightily with. He's one of the lower rated left tackles in pass pro in the entire country, Calvin Clemens. But see, I kind of go at it inversely. My pursuit of this information doesn't start at PFF. I mean, I was watching tape for a day and a half, and then once I see certain things start to surface, I wonder if there's numbers that will support that case. And I saw him struggling in a big way, to the point that, to be honest with you, they weren't even giving him as much help as I thought they might, like attaching a tight end or chipping it back. Sometimes they did, but not to the, especially against Missouri, not to the degree that I expected them to, as he struggled. But then I looked the numbers up, and sure enough, they corroborated what I was seeing. But let's talk about him for a minute, because what makes this super interesting, can I talk in my new tongue? Super interesting is I talked about our sack numbers. And of course, every Mountaineer fan with a pulse knows, yes, we're top 3 in the country in sacks. And oh, by the way,
Jamori Robinson,
one of the most coveted edge rushing additions of the portal this offseason, is eligible for the first time on Saturday. Jamori Robinson. I don't know how many snaps that means he gets, but let's start with this, and then I'll talk about this tackle. I was thinking last week, if he would have gotten against Pitt, and if not for the logistics and the crazy behind-the-scenes things that unfolded, the NCAA's kind of nastiness, but I was wondering how he would handle that against Pitt, because against Pitt, they were a tempo team, or they claimed to be, and you're kind of stuck when you sub somebody. He might be in there for 5 snaps, and you can't control it. So now all of a sudden, how well does he know the big picture defensively with the looks that they might throw at? You can't just say it's 3rd and 8, get in there. right? Because a tempo team might convert, and then the next thing you know, here comes a look he wasn't expecting. His run fits wrong. You don't know what he knows and doesn't know. Whereas, yes, you want to get him there to where he does see the big picture defensively and where he is fully prepared. But with this more methodical offense out of Kansas, you're going to have more structured opportunities to insert him if you so choose. You might say get in there for a series and he's ready for it. But if you don't want to, if it's a passing down, if it's 2nd and 10 or it's 3rd and 7, you can say get in there and get out. Because the way Kansas handles their business, they're in no hurry to snap the football. So you're going to have every opportunity to do that. So that's one of the things that makes it interesting. But let's talk about the struggling left tackle in Calvin Clements. First of all, when you look at the pressures through 3 games against Jalen Daniels, when you consider all the assets that are blocking for a quarterback and trying to prevent pressures on that quarterback, including the quarterback himself, the quarterback can be responsible for some of his own pressures. And trust me, that's something that's very trackable. So you look at the 5-0 line spots, you look at all your running backs, you look at your tight ends, and they go multiple tight ends. See all these different candidates that if you have a high pressure number, wow, you've been pressured X amount of times through 3 games, you can say, well, okay, how many came from this position? How many came from that position? Guess what percentage of his overall pressures, Jalen Daniels, have come from this one spot at left tackle?
50.
41. 41% of all, it's a good guess, Wes. 41% of all, again, you have how many guys that could be responsible for this? How many positions? 5-0 line positions, 2 or 3 tight end positions, multiple backs, and Jalen Daniels himself being responsible for some. 41% came from Calvin. Well, I don't just want to say Calvin Clements, the left tackle spot at large. He's just played the lion's share of the snaps there. He's the lowest graded tackle in pass pro, offensive tackle in the Big 12. He has this next one's according to Sports Info Solutions. He has 8 blown blocks in pass pro, which is also the most in the Big 12. Again, at times they'll help him, but not help him to the degree that you might expect. Now, here's why this conversation starts to get interesting. We haven't talked as much about Jalen Daniels himself quite yet, right? Well, when you look at Jalen Daniels, consider this. First, we had these conversations with Parker Navarro. Jalen's a different animal in that, yes, he's twitchy, yes, he's quick, but he's also strong. He has some brute strength to him, so he'll shake you loose that way. So he's kind of a combination of Eli Holstein and Parker Navarro in that he's twitchy where Holstein isn't and Navarro is, but he's strong where Holstein might be, but Navarro wasn't. So he's a handful in that sense. You know why it's critical to corral him when he tries to escape and extend a play? Because when he scrambles to extend a play, his time to throw climbs to 7.57 seconds. It's the highest in the Big 12 by a wide margin. Imagine if you're a safety and you see him escaping. Oh, all you got to do is cover everybody, plaster for 7.5+ seconds. That's worse than backyard football. I don't think at recess you're asked to do that before the quarterback has some. What was it, like a 5 Mississippi before you can rush the quarterback at recess, right? I mean, just imagine when he breaks free, that's a tall ask for your secondary. So it's critical not to allow that to happen. Now, let's look at his quick game versus his drop back game. And this is where he's evolved a little bit. If you can impact him versus keep him clean, it's obviously going to have a similar effect of what it does with most quarterbacks. When he's kept clean, he completes over 80% of his throws. His yards per attempt is a chunky 11.2. That's a really big number. That's incompletions and completions divided out. That's a big number. 7 touchdowns, 1 pick when he's kept clean. 81%. Now, when he's under pressure, which he's been under duress more this year than previous years, when he's under pressure, that number drops from 81% completion rate to 52%. And that yards per attempt that I was talking about being so chunky at over 11 yards, it drops under 5 yards. He's getting rid of the football quickly. Obviously, he's under pressure. So how often does he get the football out quickly, and do they work the quick game as an answer to some of the struggles they've had up front? That's where this gets interesting. Listen to some of this comparison this year versus last year when they had a pretty formidable offensive line with some NFL talent in it, plus these 2 returning starters. When you look at the percentage of times that his throws were at least 20 yards downfield, so he was holding the football in the pocket long enough to take some shots downfield, 20-plus yard throws. Last year, 23% of his throws, more than that, almost 1 in 4, were downfield 20-plus yards. This year, that number's plummeted to 16%, less than 1 in 6. He doesn't have time to do that. Last year, his average depth of target was over 12 yards. Same type of thing. When you set up in the pocket, you're protected well, you got plenty of time. We talked about the fact they don't use those backs in the pass game as much because sometimes they're keeping them in as blockers to give him extra time. Last year, because of this, he was able to average over 12 yards each time he targeted a receiver. This year, that's down under 10. He has to get it out faster. When you look at his time to throw average, this might seem slight, but this is a big difference when you're standing in a pass pocket. Trust me. Last year, it was 3.08 seconds, almost 3.1. This year, it's under 2.8. That 0.3 is a massive difference for a quarterback. You hear your biological clock ticking in your head. When those types of things start undergoing that level of reduction, that's an issue. Now, the percentage of throws that he's getting off in under 2.5 seconds, how often is he working his quick game? Last year, didn't have to as much. Only 40% of the time was he throwing the football in less than 2.5 seconds. They weren't working the quick game as much because they didn't have to. This year, it's over 50%. 52% of the time this year, he has to get rid of it in under 2.5 seconds. And finally, the last number. Last year, how often was he under pressure, under duress? That could be a sack, that could be a hurry, or that could be a quarterback hit. You count all those metrics as pressures. Last year, with that offensive line, only 27% of the time was he under pressure. This year, that's ballooned up to 38%. And again, bear in mind, here comes Jamori Robinson, one more tool in the toolbox of one Zach Alley. So this gets kind of interesting in the sense of where's this going to go? How's this going to work? Guys, I don't know. And one of the other interesting things that stood out to me about Jalen Daniels, I saw him having some success through a few games, and this is what gets me sniffing something out. He seemed to be lighting people up quite a bit on second down, not so much on early downs or late downs. Normally, it's first down you do that because first down is the most unpredictable down to a defense. You really have no idea outside of a crazy penalty or something. On an average first down situation, the defense has no idea what's coming. So it's an all guessing game. So it's advantage offense. Well, with Jalen Daniels in this Kansas offense, by far his most effective down throwing the football is second down. He's actually the highest rated passer in the nation on second down. He's piled up a bunch of touchdowns, no turnovers. He's been really impressive from a second down standpoint. So, all hands on deck, whatever the second down situation might be. But when you're looking at this, there's pressure opportunities. What are we going to do defensively? Again, when you look at Zach and how he's been doing things and how he's been taking care and approaching his business zone, because I'm going to toss to you here. For 3 games, about 66, or roughly 2/3 of the time, Zach has had odd stack personnel on the field. I don't want to say an odd stack defense or configuration, but odd stack personnel. So 3 down linemen, 3 backers, and 5 back end players, safety / corners. The next most common with him has been 2 down linemen, 4 backers, and 5 DBs. Is this elite one of those weeks? Because he does bounce. We talked about it in those Zach Alley episodes. He completely reinvents himself week to week. Do you see more even this week? He hasn't seen as much of it. We threw some different looks at Pitt with, multiple bandits on the field that they hadn't seen. But at the same time, it gives you that creativity on the back end. That's one of the things Zach will do is against Pitt, he wanted to be able to drop 8 when he chose to because he wanted to get as creative as possible with his coverage looks to try and confuse Pitt. But that's because Pitt was going 5 out so often with their targets, their tight ends, their receivers, their running backs. That's not as often the case with Kansas. This is a bit of a different challenge. But I look at it like this. They always say that a quarterback like Jalen Daniels is going to go above and beyond and do things off script and make special things happen, right? Well, who's to say that the defensive answer to that is having a couple guys on defense swell up and do the same thing? Play beyond the call sheet, do things you're not expected to do, much like Jalen Daniels is doing offensively. Maybe you beat a double team. Maybe you out-leverage a great angle that a blocker has on you and beat that angle. Maybe we have a couple of defenders do some things that they're not expected to do to offset what Jalen Daniels is going to do that he's not expected to do. But it's a tall task against a talented quarterback, no doubt about it. But the chess match piece of it has me really intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest point with him putting, basically putting more athletes on the field, correct? And being to have that athleticism if he needs it. And I think that's kind of what, adding Jamori, if I'm not mistaken, with a guy like that, you can have him, you know, give you that rush off the edge, possibly, uh, you know, get back in coverage if need be. Um, and honestly, with our defensive line play last week, I mean, you really saw us getting push and being able to create havoc up front. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. This is another great challenge for Zach with these quarterbacks, these athletic dual threat quarterbacks, and Jalen Daniels is, in my opinion, one of the best we'll see this season. Um, Definitely this week, right? Because if we're going to look week to week, let's just look at it like that. This week we definitely have a challenge with him, and thus far throughout the rest of the season we'll have those challenges. But I think he'll get creative, just like he has been, in trying to mix up looks and give us the best opportunity to have those athletes on the field to make plays.
Wes?
Yeah, and Jed, I just not much to add except for I think you've got a chance to make them a little one-dimensional. I think you've got a chance to, make them have to put the ball in Jalen Daniels' hands and let him try and win it. They haven't had through 3 games, they haven't had a 100-yard rusher. They haven't had a 90-yard rusher yet. Continue to limit that. Continue to make them one-dimensional. Hopefully, a little predictable, and be able to pin those ears back and go hunt some quarterbacks again, something that they have certainly done over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we are built to rush the passer.
Yes.
From a scheme standpoint, that's what Zach Alley's strength is. Okay, he's going to find ways to do that. So if you can reduce them to one dimension offensively and then set out to attack that single dimension, to your point, if you can neutralize the run game or mitigate it enough that they have to throw more than they're comfortable with. I mean, if Jalen Daniels is throwing the football 35 or 40 times, that's an advantage of West Virginia. That's not what they want to do. Now, they might dial up 30 or 35 or 40 play calls under certain circumstances, but he's going to take off running on a dozen of them. But a couple final things to add, speaking of him running. When they are in the red zone, and we talked about us swelling up so far through 3 games in the red zone, it's so critical that continues. Jalen Daniels has 20 touchdowns in his career. Guys, 18 of those 20 are in the red zone. They weaponize the daylights out of him in the red zone. 18 of his 20 career touchdowns rushing are in the red zone. We talked about how this O-line has struggled. It's difficult to overcome. I mean, look at what happened. There are going to be hiccups. When we lost Doug Nestor, there were hiccups. Losing Wyatt Milo, of course, there are hiccups. Losing Zach Frazier, we experienced hiccups. We weren't quite the same. They lost Logan Brown, Michael Ford, Bryce Cabaldo. These were all Big 12 caliber guys, and that's difficult to replace, and they're struggling to do so. So it's no wonder they're still trying to find their way to some extent through 3 games. But from a pressure standpoint, they allowed 18 pressures against Missouri. That's one thing. But they allowed 10 against Fresno. Fresno had 10 pressures on him. So and the final thing I'll add, this is intriguing. They've always been a zone-heavy team in the run game. I think a big part of that just so perfectly fit Devin Neal and his vision and his skill set. And you kind of thought that Daniel Highshaw could to some extent pick that up and take off with it. But they're one of the few teams that run more zone than us. They're a very zone-heavy team. So that's a different type of challenge as well. But what do we always talk about with zone-heavy teams, Owen? It takes continuity and it takes reps. That's where we're at and trying to master our zone concepts. Yeah. As those O-linemen have to rep this out and understand each other's shorthand and body language and detach from those double teams to climb to the second level at the appropriate time or stay engaged, Kansas is going through the same type of learning curve. So if you can be disruptive, if you can penetrate, and if you can do that right at the point of attack with that defensive line room, boy, that would be huge. But I do think if we can make them struggle to run the football, all kind of advantages tilt our way.
100%. I think without a doubt, and I think that's going to bear out throughout the course of the regular season. You know, you mentioned 3 games in. You know, we're quarter of the way here now. I think that'll be something we'll be saying a lot over these last 9 games.
Yeah.
Well, Jed, what do you say we spend the block now and focus on the WVU offense against this Kansas defense?
We can sure do that, and it's going to start with a coordinator, again, promoted internally. He was on staff already in DK McDonald. I texted you guys earlier. It's just the longer you do this, the more you see these connections. DK McDonald was a DB for an Edinburgh team back in the late 90s that when I was coaching with Rick Trickett, we coached against that Edinburgh team. It's just, like I said, the longer you do this, the more these types of things you encounter. So, you know, I texted Travis today and told him that. So he's literally coaching against us as, you know, the senior offensive analyst against a defensive coordinator that his dad coached as a player against. So, but DK McDonald, he's one of those guys who comes from that Mount Union, Ohio coaching tree, Division III powerhouse that from which sprouted Sirianni, the head coach of the Eagles, Matt Campbell at Iowa State. All these different coaches have come out of that coaching garden, that fertile ground at Mount Union, and they're all connected. Now, when you think, obviously, of Matt Campbell, you think of John Heacock, you think of the odd stack and what he's done with that at Iowa State. And sure enough, DK McDonald mastered that during his time at Iowa State, but he was also with the Eagles long enough to be part of some pretty big things with the Eagles, with Sirianni. So he's seen this at all levels, and he too is a very creative mind. So he came in, and I think you had a defense that was, to some extent, these days it's not like it used to be where you inherit a defense and 80% of the guys are back on the roster, but there's still some level of returning players at a program as stable as Kansas, and I think they probably had more even front talent than they did odd front, maybe. Even though he's an odd front guy, there were some expectations that hey, you're going to see more of an even front, even though he's an odd stack guy. And I'm not so sure. I mean, so far it's been kind of a mixed bag, and you listen to Rich and talk about how many different things they do and how many different things they run. He's absolutely right. It's tough to get a bead on something. Now, the upside would be, especially from an offensive line standpoint, you heard Jack McNell on Rich's show this week, did a great job talking about, you know, Tony asked him, he said, hey, what does it mean to face Zach Alley every day in defense? He said, it means that you're seeing different looks that we're forced to discuss every day. So we're more prepared. He said, I've been part of defenses, or I've been part of programs that face nothing but our own even front defense all the way through spring and all the way through camp. And a week before the open, you're like, oh no, we're facing an odd front team. What do we do? That's not the case when you're facing Zach Alley's defense every day in practice. So yes, Kansas might throw a ton of looks at you, and they will, but it's not like you're not seeing a ton of looks already. Now, which, as we're talking about the O-line, it's worth mentioning too. I didn't see one of the things that you look to early with a new running back. Oh, and you can speak to this, stepping in. Okay, can you trust him in pass pro? I didn't see any major gaffes by Ty Edwards in pass pro. You would expect Clay Ash to hold his own, of course, but Ty Edwards was the one that lacked the reps and the experience in the system. But yeah, so that was pleasing as well. Not only was he productive with the football in his hands, but he was also productive with the football not in his hands. And that's always what you ask of a guy as a next step. Now, we talked about West Virginia. This is a tale of two offenses. As methodical and plodding and slow paced as Kansas is right now, West Virginia is ripping off a play once every 19.9 seconds. That's the fastest power conference offense in football. And what you saw against Pitt, despite the slow start, remember how disjointed it felt to the first quarter? We had those 3 straight sacks. You're like, what's going to happen here? That's why they play 60 minutes plus sometimes, guys. That was a long game for that Pitt defense, despite the slow start. Who would have guessed 10 minutes into that game that Pitt was going to be confronted with 90 offensive snaps by West Virginia? But we did it. We found the rhythm. We ended up with 28 first downs. Rich always strives to get 25. But so we were there. Now, from a disruption standpoint, look at what Kansas has been able to do. They'll knock you off script, they'll knock you off schedule. Their defense leads the Big 12 in tackles for loss with 26 already. What's interesting about that is they have some missed opportunities as well, because we talk about our missed tackles on defense. Well, a week ago, we got that number down to 14. It still wasn't perfect against Pitt, and we can improve. But guys, Kansas through 3 games has the worst tackling grade in the Big 12. And that kind of supports some of what you see. Now, a big part of that was what happened against Missouri. They missed 25 tackles against Missouri. Every time I turn around, you had a Missouri Tiger shaken loose in a situation that you thought they had him dead to rights, and it just didn't happen. But yeah, 25 missed tackles in one football game against Missouri inflated that number, because outside of that, they were relatively in control of the other 2 opponents, including Fresno. They're number 3 in the Big 12 in sacks. You get a lot of TFLs that kind of goes hand in hand. They had 4 against Missouri. Against Missouri and a pretty formidable offensive line, pretty tough offense the Tigers have. They found a way to get 4 sacks against them, against them and that quarterback, a very athletic Missouri quarterback. So here's what's interesting. 3rd down, we'll get into this before we talk personnel. When you look at Missouri against the pass on 3rd down, I saw them struggling, so I tried to sniff it out, see if there's anything to support this. They've allowed the 2nd highest completion percentage on 3rd down in the country. That's 79%. So they're really coached to keep things in front of them. That doesn't always mean that you're converting, but it does mean that you're making at least a little bit of hay. Now, I don't know what that might mean. It converts to more 4th down opportunities depending on down and distance and field position. Maybe. Stay tuned, because we know Rich. If it's 4th and 4, or if it's 4th and reasonable or manageable, and you're at the 40 plus or moving in, he's rolling dice and going for it. So consider that when they give up 79% of the time, you're going to complete a pass against them on 3rd down, even if it's underneath. So that's something to think about. They've allowed the highest passer rating in the Big 12 defensively on 3rd down. They've allowed the highest yards per attempt in the Big 12 on 3rd down, over 9 yards per attempt. You got to get better than that if you're trying to get people off the field on 3rd down. And then the highest yards per cover snap. So that's what's interesting about this, is they're getting to the quarterback more than most. They're 3rd in the Big 12 in sacks, but maybe part of that's because people are pushing the football vertically on them so often. But at the same time, how do you reconcile that with all the checkdowns to drive that completion rate up to 79%? So either way, there's a pretty thick plot to pay attention to on 3rd down for more than just the typical and already critical and obvious reasons. So pay attention to that as the game plays out. But let me get your quick general thoughts or initial thoughts on it. We'll get into some personnel here.
I mean, general thoughts, like I said, earlier before we went, was just, offensively, the line, we have to get better this week. Last week was a good start after what we came off was a bad Ohio effort. But I felt like we definitely got better that next week. We just, like you said, Jed, have to keep stacking those chips and improve. And maybe this week I'd like to see even maybe a little bit more running back rotation. I'm still kind of waiting to see if we'll see a rip max formation with kind of big back, speed back type deal, like we did so heavily back in the day. But that's to be seen. Hopefully Cam gets off this week. I know it's going to be tough. I mean, he's kind of made his presence known early on this season. So, he's always going to get the lion's share of the defensive backs. But they'll find it out. We threw it to a lot of different guys on Saturday, so we'll end up seeing what happens. Biggest thing for me is just get the push, protect the quarterback, get the push. I know it's super cliche, but Wes, you got anything to add about that?
Well, I think this is a Kansas defense that's still trying to find out a lot who they are. They played 2 lesser opponents, no disrespect to Fresno State and Wagner, right? But they played 2 lesser opponents and won comfortably to open the season. And then they went on the road to Missouri, an SEC school, and they give up 42 points. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jed. I'm sure you'll get into this, but I do believe that Kansas was actually the only defense in the Big 12 that brought back less production than WVU did this year.
Correct.
So now they do have a guy that we're familiar with in Trey Lathan. I'm sure you'll get to that as well too. But so this is a Kansas defense, real successful week 1, real successful week 2 against lesser foes, then goes on the road, buzzsaw, Missouri, rival game, SEC opponent away from home, and they give up 42. They're still trying to find out, they're not the team that's going to give up 7 points every week like they did the first couple weeks. They're also not going to give up 42 points every week. Who are we? What do we do best? Whereas, again, that's one of those advantages that I like. We talked about this going into the Pitt game, how they had, all Pitt's starters had been on the on the bench with their helmets and their pads off by the fourth quarter the first 2 weeks, whereas WVU was in a dogfight in Athens, and then when it was time to get in a dogfight again at Mountaineer Field, we were like, ready, here we go, and they were gassed and hadn't experienced that this year. I hope that you can keep that defense guessing, about who they are and how exactly that they're just trying to figure themselves out here, after kind of a very lopsided start to the season in terms of the opposition that they faced.
Yeah, you nailed it, Wes. They had to completely start from scratch. They are the only team in the Big 12 that returns defensively less than West Virginia from a production standpoint. I mean, you would think that Dean Miller is back, as he was a full-time starter for them, and he was a pretty talented kid. You would think that almost single-handedly he could do it, right? But because we return so very little, but no, that's not the case. So what they had to do was they had to dive into the portal, plus promote some younger guys and kind of see where they land. And you mentioned Trey Lathan. Trey Lathan's playing some pretty good football for them. I was impressed with what I saw on tape. He is making some plays for them. They lean on him quite a bit. He's one of 2 linebackers they landed from the portal. The other one being this Bengali kid they landed from South Carolina. They have a pretty talented safety on the back end in Mason Ellis. So they're still trying to figure out who their leaders are. For all the questions West Virginia has, they do as well. And there are a lot of parallels with these 2 defenses. I mean, West Virginia's in Kansas. And when you look at them, I think of this, a bunch of untested personnel that's trying to feel things out and figure out where they fit best. You have a talented young staff that's trying to figure out what their defense is best at and what things they struggle with so they can be eliminated. And I think that's where DK McDonald is. And the answer is, much like what Zach Alley has done with a bunch of different looks, DK McDonald throws a bunch of different looks at you. As much as people were talking about the possibility of them being an even front team, that hasn't necessarily been the case as much. They do everything. You heard Rich talk about it. You'll see a little bit of bare front where they'll cover the center and both guards to make your life a little more difficult with that interior run game. And for that matter, get some push in the pass rush. But they run a configuration with just 2 down linemen, 4 backers, and 5 defensive backs. And they're 8th in the country in how much they deploy that personnel group. So that's among the odd stack look that, of course, he learned from Heacock, and yes, he kind of leans on that too. Like 1 out of every 4 snaps, you'll see him with odd stack personnel, but then you also see him beef up a little bit and bring an extra backer onto the field and being a true 3-4. So you're going to get different looks, and this is the time of year that maybe this is the week they show up in an even front. It's just, who knows? Because Missouri completely took over that football game against this Kansas defense. They completely overwhelmed them and had their way with them for certainly the final 2.5 quarters or so. But that's not as fair a comparison. It was easier for that Missouri offensive line to push them around. They had a little more continuity. The things that we're striving for but haven't quite achieved yet. So the cat and mouse aspect of this football game is going to be a far more prominent part than it was when Kansas lined up against an SEC team for their 3rd game out against Missouri in that rivalry. This is much more a game that's going to be dependent on coaching and situational football and situational awareness. Who can be the most opportunistic? Can we continue to force those turnovers, have those takeaways? Can we scoop the ball up once it hits the carpet? Can we put Jalen Daniels in adverse situations and force him into some poor decisions by containing him, by bottling him up? I think it all starts with this. Uh, when you look at West Virginia, here's what I find promising from a snap count standpoint through 3 games. The Mountaineers, who have played more snaps than anybody, 1 through 5, Nick Cray, Walter Youngbear, Tykees Crawford, Landon Livingston, and Chemo. I'm still not about to try and pronounce his last name. So there's the 5, okay? Our O-line have more reps and more snaps. And what do we say every week? We have to rep this out. There's no magic formula to overnight flipping a switch and becoming this dominant force at the point of attack. You have to rep this thing out. And right there, I just listed over 1,000 reps that collectively these 5 have. And there's something to be said for that. So it's going to be critical. I double back to what I said earlier. Can we get 1 week better? That's what we're going to have to do. If you can find a way to get 1 week better with every position group, but more specifically with that tight end group or with that O-line group. And then, if the tight ends can take the next step and maybe contribute a little more as blocking assets. We know they can be playmakers in the pass game. We know that. But now can you truly do more than just occupy some space or get in the way or play some angles in the run game? I think they can, and I think they're working towards that. And what I've really liked, Owen, through the 3 games is seeing how much gap scheme Rich has deployed to give these guys a little bit of confidence and swagger. And I mean, no big-bodied fella that's ever been worth his weight didn't just love being asked to pull and smack somebody in space. I mean, those guys like that. They like doing that. And whether it's a tight end or whether it's a guard or even sometimes whether it's Landon Livingston at center, I like when he deploys that, whether it's the counter scheme. But I do think that that's another way to instill some confidence, and it translates beyond the gap scheme into some of the zone scheme. And it's part of the larger picture of what we need to do offensively. So it's going to make us into a more well-rounded offense. And can Nico continue to develop in the way that he finished strong? You want to build on that? We almost wrapped up an offensive preview without talking about our quarterbacks. And Nico just had a performance for the ages. He directed traffic. He made critical plays. His ball placement was impeccable. And there's still other guys in that room that can do other things that create problems for defenses so long as they're not counterproductive. So what's that going to look like? I mean, if we don't know, you think, what do you think Kansas is sitting there wondering? What are they going to do at quarterback? Kansas has no idea. So, I mean, it's a true guessing game, right, Owen?
Yeah, and 3 games in, like you said, Jed, we're still we don't really know what or who we really are fully. So it's got to be hard for a team to really scheme for us. It's not just a game you can just, bank on one guy. Now, do we think, Nico's going to emerge as the guy? I mean, it looks like he is, but you still got 2 athletic quarterbacks behind him there that if Rich thinks he needs a spark, I mean, he's gonna try to light it up. I mean, that's kind of seems like his kind of philosophy if the offense is dragging a little bit. So,
Yeah.
and then Ty comes in what first game really and ends up putting up a great day, runs with a purpose. Are we going to find another guy? Obviously we have Clay he's Mr. Consistent. um but are we gonna is another guy gonna emerge that's gonna be a thunder to the lightning deal? So it'd be tough. And to your point as well, tight ends, yeah, I mean, not much involvement except for pass game. Are we just kind of hiding plays still? And not really showing much kind of as well. And that lies into what we talked about even before the season. How do you cram in everything in 2.5 months? It's impossible. So week to week, it's almost to your advantage a little bit. You're finding out about your team. You're trying different things each week. Oh, this works. Now we can bring this into our scheme. To your point exactly, too, with the gap scheme, those guys obviously, he said they were drooling over, the heavy package. So,
Yeah.
you got guys back there that want to hit. Who's to say we're not going to see variations of that in the game, especially in short yardage situations, which I would love. I mean, I would love to see, not just goal line situations, but third and ones, fourth and ones. Hey, this is that's our identity, right? We are a tough team. That's what we are about. We're gonna line it up. You're gonna see what we got here. We got a bunch of beef, a bunch of cheeseburger boys back here, and we're gonna ground and pound. So just excited to kind of see the evolution of the team each week, and I hope it's just positive, like we've talked about on the show this week.
Yeah, Wes, I agree.
I completely do as well too. I think that about covers it, gentlemen. And like I said, one that everybody is going to be tuning into with a renewed sense of enthusiasm and optimism and all of that Saturday night out there in Lawrence,
Pay
Kansas.
attention. Sincere Bowers. We didn't know before Pitt who was going to truly take that step and emerge. And there was some question. Would it be Ty? Would it be Sincere? Completely different skill sets. That's an interesting piece to this.
That's what I
And
mean.
then
Is he
Cam
gonna get
Vaughn's
some
become
more
a fan
reps?
favorite too, guys. You know,
He sure has.
what's that, Owen? Cam Vaughn's become a fan favorite, I was going to say. So on the perimeter, he's
Oh,
something to be
absolutely. I
dealt
mean,
with. Yeah.
that's what I mean. And he's only all he's doing is opening it up for everybody else on the field. So, I know it's for him. He seems like he's got a great head on his shoulders. I thought it was really funny on that last touchdown we scored to go into overtime. He like put his arm around the Pitt player. Like it was just,
That's
he's
hilarious.
just he seems like he's got a great sense of humor. He's obviously a competitor, but to your point too about the running back room, we really haven't seen what we even have. You know what I mean? Two guys have really well, for the unfortunate Jaheim, but two guys have played. So what else do we have? What other tricks does Rich have? And I'm sure we'll see him on Saturday.
For that matter, talk about the heavy package. We'll close with that. Uh, what do you at this juncture, unless you get really creative and throw to the back, what are you not going to do out of the heavy package? You're not going to throw the football, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
unless there's changes
That's what I
made
mean.
and extra wrinkles. So what do we always say about those other four quarterbacks outside of Nico? What can they do?
Yeah.
They can all run.
Right.
So now all of a sudden, what if one of them's in there
Do you
for
put
that heavy
two QBs
package?
in there? Yeah.
Who knows what's going on? If Jalen Henderson's back there, he's the one with all that speed and twitch, and he's the one making the handoff. You're like, whoa, now we got to keep contained too? I'm like, who knows,
Yeah.
Oh, hey, it's a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting. That's why we do it. That's why we're excited. That's why we'll all be tuned in Saturday night at 6:00 to see how this all plays out. Before we get up out of here, we got to do our weekly pick'em, of course. But that will begin with the signal caller recapping how we all did this past week.
Yeah, I got to find my tweet to the group. It was Schuyler's week, wasn't it?
It sure
The revenge
was.
of Schuyler.
It sure
Couple
was.
weeks ago, we all
he's
scored
not
5, and he got shut out, and he got his revenge this week. Let me see.
He did much like the Empire. He did strike back. How about that?
I thought I sent that to the group. Maybe I didn't.
I don't think you did send it. I think you just sent
right
your Phil Steele stuff for
Okay,
Friday.
I got it right here. Okay. Week 3, the revenge of Schuyler. Jed's passing offense. I picked Arizona to throw for the most yards. Not so fast. Texas Tech led the way in the Big 12 with 464 against basically Oregon State nobody team. Arizona finished 10th with 178 yards. So I got 0. Owen, you picked Iowa State to rush for the most yards. It was actually Utah, 311. We'll see those Utes in Morgantown next week. Iowa State, 187 yards just on the outside looking in. You finished 6th at 0. You almost got a point. Wes, you picked TCU to allow the fewest points. They allowed 21. They finished 9th. Cincinnati actually pitched the shutout. So no points. Schuyler, meanwhile, to score the most points, he picked the Baylor Bears. Cincinnati actually scored the most in the 70-0 shutout win, but Baylor tied for third place with 42 points. So Schuyler gets 3 points. So before we go to this week's picks, let's, if I can get these beady eyes to work through my glasses well enough to read the fine print. Okay, last week's picks. Beat Wes, Cincinnati. Okay, who picked Cincinnati? Looks like Joe from North Hills, West Virginia, picked Cincinnati. And Joe picked Utah to rush for the most yards. Joe got 2 out of 4.
Nice,
Good job, Joe. Good job, Joe. And then Keith from Bridgeport. He got 2 right. He picked Utah to rush for the most yards. He picked Texas Tech to throw for the most yards. He got 2 out of 4. Joseph from, is it Chapin or Chapin? I think it's Chapin, South Carolina. Picked Texas Tech to throw for the most yards. So he got 1 out of 4. He got 1 right. Hard enough. And then finally, David. Look, I'll tell you what. The creator of the logo, David Canny. It has to be David Canny. It just says David from, yeah, okay, I see it now. David Canny from Philippi. He picked Cincinnati to allow the fewest points, or to score the most points, I should say, and Texas Tech to throw for the most. So Pastor David gets 2 out of 4. So this
Very
week,
nice.
Good job, excellent. And once again, go to that pinned tweet on In the Gun Podcast on X and join in the fun. And we'll give you a shout out if you get any right. But
right.
For that matter, who knows? You might end up winning something. We'll see if you get all 4 right. You probably win something. I think we still owe Jake Botel from Down Under something for getting 4 right last year.
We do.
So he's on our list, but on a good list.
Yeah, I dropped the ball on that. I apologize.
We'll get him
Drop
something.
what?
We'll get him something.
No. We'll figure it out. Let's see. Wasn't it like $2 million or something to mail something to Australia?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll email him something. Okay. This week, I'm going to go most passing yards. Let's keep it simple, stupid. Baylor's got a big matchup at home against Arizona State. Let's go with the fighting Jake Spavittles. Jake, don't let me down. Jake's my boy. Don't let me down, Jake.
Sawyer Robertson's been cooking, man.
Oh, he has. Yeah.
Schuyler
or Wes?
Yeah, I was going to give Schuyler's pick. Schuyler's going to go with TCU as his offense of the week. They are at home against SMU and kind of the Methodist, the Methodist, the Methodist versus the Christian showdown here. This is if we're the Backyard Brawl, this is the I don't know, the side pew, the side pew brawl or something like that.
What do you call the revival tents? They have some name for
revivalry.
That's revivalry. That's what they call it. That's what they call it.
Yeah. You're right. It's a good pick by Schuyler. Owen, beer truck of the week. Who's going to rush for the most yards?
Man, I've been looking at these things. It looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, are Baylor and Arizona giving up basically just a chunk of yards each week? It looks like they're the worst in the Big 12 right now.
It's the second.
You're going to make the mistake. You're going to make the mistake of putting thought into it. That's what I always do, and I always lose.
That's the problem. So here's my thing. So exactly. So I was like, I'm tired of looking at these charts. Like I'm making myself weird. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to stick with the momentum of last week, and I'm going to go with WVU.
Ooh, I love
Rushing defense. I like it. Rushing defense. Owen in the Big 12. You ready? Number 1 is BYU. Number 2 is Texas Tech. 3 is Utah. At the bottom is Oklahoma State. Let me see. Baylor is 14th. They're toward the bottom. And Arizona State is 4th.
Yeah.
They've actually done a decent job. So,
not bad. I'll close us down. This is a very easy one for me, fellas. I'm going to take Colorado at home against Wyoming. I know Colorado has struggled, but Wyoming's offense has scored 10 or less points in 2 of their 3 games. They are a putrid offense, are the Cowboys, and Josh Allen ain't walking through that door to save them. So I will take Colorado in a battle of the Cowboys and the Buffaloes. Historically, that one went the Cowboys' way, but I'll take the Buffaloes.
The question is, if Colorado wins, do they
Saturday
retire
night.
Ryan Staub's jersey?
They better. They certainly better. And that one, a 10:15 start on Saturday night. I'll be going to bed around the time the second or third possession of the game is happening. But I'll take the Buffaloes to best the Cowboys and hold them to a low score. So that's it for our pick'em. A couple housekeeping items here before we get out of here. Owen's latest barbecue with the beer truck video dropped on Tuesday. That's on our YouTube page. It is a sensational smoked beans recipe this week that just looks fantastic. Had me jonesing for it. I'm gonna have to throw that thing together here soon. But I'll get to this in just a second, but I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling over the next 2 weeks, so it might have to wait a little bit. We also, of course, as always, have Phil Steele coming up tomorrow on Friday to tee up a huge weekend, a bunch of top 20, big one in the Big 12 between Utah and Texas Tech. You've got some rivalries like Miami and Florida this weekend. You've got a top 25 matchup between Oklahoma and Auburn. You've got a top 20 matchup between Indiana and Illinois, a rivalry game there. So a lot of fun ones that Jed and Schuyler will get into to tee up the college football weekend with Phil Steele later on. And then, yes, gentlemen, for kind of you in the audience, I don't know. We'll have to see. This might be my last episode for like a week and a half here because I'm going to be traveling back on Sunday night. I don't know if I'll be able to make the recap episode.
Yeah.
And then I leave early next week to go to Dublin until Monday. I'm going to be in Dublin for 5 or 6 days. I know I'm not complaining. All right. I'm going to be in Dublin for 5 or 6 days. So next week, obviously, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be available as well at all too. So if you don't see me on any of the episodes next week, don't worry. Jed and Owen didn't fire me yet. Okay. I'm just doing the jig and drinking some Guinness across the pond.
Perfect.
But that will do it. I will have some stories certainly the next time that I am on here from our Irish excursions, and I know Big Daddy will be very, very jealous, and hopefully we'll have a couple of big Mountaineer victories and a solid start to the Big 12 conference slate as well too. But we got plenty still to come this week.
You have no idea where you're watching the Utah game yet, do you? Or what time that'll even be?
Well, it's a 3:30 start, which makes it perfect because it's an 8:30 start in Dublin.
Okay, so you can find some tavern or something. Yeah. Okay.
We're doing some big pep rally show at the Temple Bar there in Ireland from like 1 to 5 o'clock, I think, and then I will be finding somewhere to watch the WVU game in the evening. Absolutely, gentlemen.
Yeah. All right.
So yes, so looking forward to everything still here to come. And as you know, we've got our full gambit of coverage on the way here to get you ready for this Kansas game on Saturday night. But that will do it for us today. For our producer, co-host, Mr. Do-It-All, Schuyler Callihan, for the barbecuing, beer trucking, sharp-dressed, big Owen Schmitt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Uhler. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. The one thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Also, remind somebody that you love in your life that we beat the hell out of Pitt. That's still putting a smile on our faces as well, too. So I guess we ask you 2 things for the rest of this week. But that'll do it for this edition of ITG. You know where to find us as always. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.